I can't really say this enough, but you need to get the lease in place. You have to. It's a critical component. Again, it really adds to the valuation of the building as well. It's the net operating income is what dictates the fair market value oftentimes. I mean, there's multiple ways to appraise building, but when a piece of real estate, but when you have a cash flowing asset, in this case, in a strong credit tenant with a 15-year lease, that valuation is typically dictated on that on the net operating income coming in. So you're really just you're doing yourself a disservice by not having it there.
In today's podcast interview, I discuss packaging a practice and property together for sale or purchase with Laim, an attorney at Cohen Law Firm. Cohen Law Firm specializes in representing dentists and dental specialties to either purchase or sell practices and the associated real estate. We discuss how these are valued, structured, and some best practices. Thank you, as always, for listening, and I hope you enjoy the interview. So Laim, welcome to the Providers, Properties, and Performance podcast.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to it.
So Cohen Law, you specialize in working with dentists and dental specialties. Is that correct?
That is, yes.
So how did you guys start to focus just on that niche?
Well, it was really David Cohen, the founder of our firm, who started it. I came along afterwards, to add a real estate component to our firm. But David specializes in the M&A side and the representing the dental, primarily dental clients, but knowing and seeing the need for real estate and real estate specialist in this field, he reached out and that's how we were connected.
Well, tell me a little bit about your background as a real estate attorney and getting into this.
Yeah, sure. So my background is primarily in real estate. It was a bit of a transition from the dental into the dental space. But I think the principles and concepts all carry forward, no matter the type of client. In the real estate industry, it's pretty standardized. Although there are some unique aspects of dental transaction work, certainly. But my background is primarily in real estate, and I started with a large firm in Miami. Right out of law school there, where I attended the University of Miami for my LLM, and then started with a firm there, practicing primarily in real estate, doing leasing, representing national and international clients, and also in the acquisition and disposition of property. So all commercial based. And eventually, as I grew in my practice there, it kind of led into a focus on office leasing. So it kind of evolved, in a lot of ways around that, which then eventually led into doing, several M&A deals with our firm on the other side of that, with dental and medical clients, which then led into the transition from our firm, or that existing firm, to David's firm, where I'm now.
So what was David seeing in these transactions with regard to the real estate that made him want to bring you in?
It was really the environment of our firm. It's an entrepreneurial environment, and David's a dynamic guy, and he has developed a fantastic relationship with his clients, and for me, growing in the legal field, I just felt like it was a fantastic opportunity to try to kind of focus in on certain areas of real estate and really master those, and yet have a great supporting cast. David's a fantastic lawyer. We have also several other lawyers that are in our firm that are fantastic lawyers and do a great job. And so I think it was just a great opportunity and a good time in my life to kind of make a transition, and I couldn't be happier. So things have been very, very good over the past couple of years. So yeah.
Well, dentists especially, and dental specialists as well, but they tend to be incredibly entrepreneurial. Most of the time they own their own properties and they can be a combination of standalone or not. And then they tend to be buying and selling practices a lot as well. So how do you help them put all of this together? Do you separate the real estate out, or do you value the real estate at market rates? Like, how do you put all of these pieces together?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it depends. It's really deal specific, but I think there is a practice component there, and obviously David handles that aspect of it, and then there's the real estate, whether it's a lease or the acquisition or disposition of the real estate, and even then, there oftentimes is a lease, whether it be from a practice entity to the acquiring real estate entity. It could be between single member LLCs or PLLCs, and so there are a lot of dynamics there and a lot of moving parts, and it's important, I think, to understand the deal and especially the broker that put it together. We take a position where we have a tremendous amount of respect for the brokers that we work with, and it's really kind of putting their deal, kind of trying to finalize that deal for them. They put it together, they've done the legwork there, and it's really getting that to closing and bringing it to fruition. So to that point, I think when we get an LOI or a term sheet and we look at it, and there's a variety of things, and there's this little paragraph on real estate, it's oftentimes the primary focus is on the practice. So
Right.
it's trying to educate the client on the on all the aspects of the real estate, and also the positives, and there's a lot of incentives to either owning it or selling it or leasing it. So just going through all those steps, I think, is really what it takes to get them up to speed and feel comfortable, because to your point, it is very entrepreneurial. There are a lot of opportunities, different areas, outside of just the dental space, but they might not be doing it on a daily basis, initially.
Right. So do you represent on both dentists that are buying practices with real estate, and then dentists that are selling their practice, and then they also occupy their space or own their building?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly. We do. We represent both sides. Correct.
And so if you're do the dentists that are selling their practice in real estate, do they talk to you before they talk to a broker, or do you usually get involved after the broker's involved? Because on the deals that I've seen, where on dentists that are buying the practice and the real estate together, the real estate is really undervalued.
It is. It is, and it's oftentimes an afterthought. It's just something thrown in, and they don't understand, or they, having not done this on a daily basis, they're just not familiar with the valuation of the real estate and how that number is set, and where that piece of property sits in comparison to the others in that market. And well, I guess to your first question about how that deal is handled, from us, we do have clients that will come to us initially, and they'll ask us questions on how the deal is structured, valuation of the property, different deal terms, more material business terms, and we'll walk them through that and certainly help them, and we'll advise them. Obviously, those are business points that are negotiated between the parties, and we obviously assist on the legal side as well. But there is a we certainly do have clients that take that path, and there's also it's put together from a broker as well. So and then at that point, those business points are typically already pre-negotiated. They can be obviously modified or changed, but it's usually the legwork there has already been done, or at least to some extent. So yeah, I think that's the way it typically works. It's for us, at least.
Well, if they do end up coming to you first, and then, you're able to educate them on the value of their real estate, are they typically surprised that, they could make more money doing this a little bit different way?
Yeah, they certainly are. And, I think oftentimes it's a shock to many of them to realize, the untapped value that they have in some of these assets, real estate assets, the real property, and how it's priced, its correlation to the rent that they're paying, or that they're receiving, The net operating income really drives that cap rate, and that cap rate analysis when you're trying to create a fair market value. So, that going through that exercise of explaining that and getting them educated, yes, I certainly think once they learn it and understand it and feel comfortable with it, they definitely see the opportunity there, and there certainly is.
Have you ever seen anybody like literally separate the two, where they have somebody buy the practice and not the real estate, and then they sell the real estate separately?
We have certainly, and there's oftentimes deals where the practice you needed to close, or we have a real estate component that needs to close before. We're dealing with that right now. Interest rates are a little crazy right now, so you have a lot of deals going in different directions, and term sheets are expiring, and things are coming to a head here in the next couple of weeks, and people are racing, especially this week. I know they were going to announce potentially a rate increase again, so
Yeah.
it's pretty certain it's coming. So everybody has been trying to navigate that water. It's a little different situation now than it was 6 months ago, certainly. And so it's again, yes, we do split them up. We have closed them separately. It's and that presents several legal issues and additional complexities, interim leases and so on and so forth that may need to be put in place to accomplish that. But our goal as a firm is to be as efficient as we can, and we pride ourselves on being fast. We like to do things and get documents turned around as quickly as we can. Obviously, with some limitations, they need to be done correctly. But really, we pride ourselves on getting documents out very quickly, and trying to solve those complex issues in advance, like anticipating those issues that may come up. So yeah, it certainly can be done, and it often is right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. So what are the typical deal sizes for the real estate side, for a dentist? Are they, around, do you see many that are, above 10,000 square feet, or are they kind of 10,000 square feet and below?
It depends. It really depends on the client we have. I mean, yeah, for single tenant buildings, where it will be self-occupied, or you'll have a sale lease back, so to speak, those range between 5,000, 2,500 to about 7,500 square feet. We're seeing really. We've represented several clients though, where they're buying a building that might have 10 tenants in it, or 5 tenants, and they just see the value there, in owning that, and collecting the rent, receiving that additional net operating income, creating that business, that additional business, and really capturing that value that you have, in owning real estate, and receiving the depreciation, and other benefits, tax benefits of doing that, while operating a practice in the building, and operating out of there. So in those deals, obviously the sizes of those buildings are much larger, and that process is a little bit longer. The due diligence takes a little bit. There's a slightly longer due diligence period. Reviewing the leases and inspecting the property, and your lender. The lender is a big component of that as well. They often drive these deals. And so getting the correct financing and the correct rates, we mentioned that before, it's important. And so, getting all those players in line, and trying to organize that is often a challenge, but it certainly can be done. And we try to do it as efficiently as possible.
So let me ask you this. So I probably know that when they come to you and they're like, I'm trying to sell this building, and you look at the rent roll, whether it's multi or single tenant, and they say, I don't have a lease for myself.
Yeah.
So how do you get to exactly?
Yeah.
How do you get them to understand and account for the lease expense in their lease, when they've had none, or at least expense in their financials when they've had no lease expense?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult situation, and David, is a master on the practice side and works with them and understanding, the effect of not having that in the business from a business perspective, from these PLC. It's usually a PLC. I'm using that as the
Yeah,
example, but when I say PLC, I mean the practice entity that's
right,
operating this space that
right,
would be serving as the tenant. Yeah, I can't really say this enough, but you need to get the lease in place. You
right.
have to. It's a critical component. Um, Again, it really adds to the valuation of the building as well. The net operating income is what dictates the fair market value oftentimes. I mean, there's multiple ways to appraise building, but when a building, a piece of real estate, but when you have a cash flowing asset, in this case, in a strong credit tenant with a 15-year lease, that valuation is typically dictated on that on the net operating income coming in. So you're really just you're doing yourself a disservice by not having it there, assuming that you own the building, or that you're
Yeah,
looking to purchase the building. It's critical that you evaluate the leases, you understand um, the strength of those tenants, and it's all part of the due diligence process. But yeah, having that lease in place is a critical component of
well,
purchasing. And
yeah, and it's not just
yeah,
dentists, it's all physician-owned real estate,
yeah,
some do and
exactly.
some don't. And but if you're a tenant in your own building, you should have a lease in place.
Yeah, I mean, you're losing. There's tax benefits too. I mean,
Right.
you're losing you get a you obviously the payment of rent is a business expense, and then so you're losing that opportunity to have that as an expense, paying that and showing that, reflecting that. um and really, I think it would only hurt you to not have it, because I mean, you're occupying the space, so there has to be some accounting for that. And how are you going to reconcile that later? It's often a challenge, but it's not uncommon.
Well, and I'll do one more and then we'll get into the Q&A to get to know you and get off this hard
Sure.
stuff. But so operating expenses. So I love this when they're like, they're like, well, the tenant pays all the operating expenses, but then you're like, yeah, but you know, there's property taxes and building insurance, like, and I don't see it on your P&L. So
Yeah,
who's paying it? And they literally don't know when you act like, well, they think it's one way, but then when you look at their financials and you're like, no, like this is actually how this is happening. But it doesn't matter because typically, it ends up being a triple net lease when they do a new lease. Like you as
right.
the tenant are going to want to know what it costs to operate the building because you're going to have to
Exactly.
pay all of it. So
Right.
it
Exactly.
factors into your lease expense and it comes off of your NOI for your practice. So
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It's super. I mean, it's critical. And again, we're just kind of referring to a triple net, and in
right,
that case, yeah. I mean, one of the first questions I typically ask when representing a tenant is, I'm saying to the landlord's counsel would be,
right,
what are the current operating expenses? What are do you have a copy of the taxes? Do you have a copy of the operating expenses? What are these numbers? So we can have an idea of what we're getting into, when you're entering into a 15-year relationship with,
right,
somebody, and trying to understand, what are my costs? What are these costs going to be? And
right.
you need to know those. And it's tough to, oftentimes we'll deal with clients that, may not have had a lease in place. You're working with them to understand it, and you're trying to explain all the components of that. And you have your base rent. You have to establish that base rent, and it has to be true rent. It can't
Mhm.
be, this arbitrary number set. So trying to look at market rent, trying to find, what is market for that area, and then and then factoring in the type of tenant. It's a little different with dental, and I'm sure with medical. They're high net worth credit tenants,
Mhm.
they're long-term leases, they're just priced a little bit differently than retail or other type
Right,
of other type of leasing. So working through that aspect of it, and then adding in the next layer of operating expenses, explaining what those are, explaining how they're passed through, and the calculation of those and what a tenant typically pays or what they shouldn't be paying. And yeah, it is certainly a challenge, but it's, I enjoy doing that. And I think it's, it's once they, once our clients have understood it and once we've broken it down for them, I think, it kind of flows and things
Oh,
start
yeah.
working. Yeah. And it just, makes sense at the end
Yeah.
of the day. I think
Well,
the
you have to
hardest thing though,
organize it for them. Once you organize it
exactly.
for them,
Right.
but when they're like, well, it doesn't, like when when you ask them about their operating expenses and their response is, well, it doesn't matter, I pay my bills. And you're like,
Yeah. Well, yeah, if and that's what we do. We typically have to say, look at this from like if you're leasing a space in an office building or, in a retail shopping center, pretend you don't own the building or pretend you don't have an interest in owning it. And here's what you would be receiving. This is what you would be receiving every month. You're receiving an amount for base rent, or you would be paying an amount for base rent, and then you would have received typically it's done annually. You'll receive a statement saying this is what you're going to owe, and then it's paid monthly for operating expenses and taxes, and it's based on their pro rata share. If it's a single building, it would be 100%. But it's I think the hardest thing too is setting their expectations, because that's probably the most heavily negotiated area of a lease. Carving out certain operating expenses, working to try to fix those costs for the tenant. It's a oftentimes difficult task, because landlords are set on their ways, and they've understood what those costs are for them, and they don't typically like to change those. So yeah, when it's a single building owned, and it's basically sale lease back to themselves, it's not so much of an issue, but it gets a little bit more complicated when you're leasing space in a commercial shopping center or an office building. But yeah.
Right. And sometimes they get surprised, like, because then when you're talking about putting the lease rate and the operating expenses together, then you're like, no,
Yeah.
both of these come off of the NOI. These are
Exactly.
then they start
Right.
getting kind of it's a learning experience for everybody.
It is. Yeah, it is, certainly.
Well, thanks. Do you think we missed anything that you want to add before we get to the Q&A?
No, I think we covered it. I'd love to get into the details more with this stuff, but
But it's
yeah, I
so
think
case by
it's high
case.
level. Yeah, it is. It's a high level, and really it's so exactly. It's so case by case, so specific, so deal specific. So yeah, it's tough, to try to cover everything. But yeah.
No, I think we gave a good 50,000 square foot level.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so time to get to know you a little bit. What was your first job?
First job ever, or first job in the legal space?
Whatever you feel like sharing.
So first job ever, I was a caddy for a local golf course. Yeah, and I was in high school, and I did that in the summer, and it was great. It introduced me to a lot of really interesting people. You learned how to interact with people. You learn how to control. You see different types of emotions, control your emotions, and there was an element of discipline there, and it was a great job. But yeah, that would be my first true job.
Do you play golf? Obviously.
I do.
You
I
do.
do. Yes. Yeah.
So you probably got a lot
Love
of what not to do while you're playing golf too.
Exactly. It was an education of its own in its own self. It was great. It certainly gave you like that perspective, but you also got to see, I think other people reacting to certain things, and it was a good learning experience, certainly.
Well, I think probably what's also interesting is that people that are awesome golfers, sometimes don't hit the very best shots, and then they
Right.
have to problem solve out of that bad shot.
Yes.
And even the best players.
Golf is a very humbling game. It's a very, I don't know. I played football, in high school and in college. I played basketball and baseball in high school, and so I love sports. But golf is its own animal, and you could be the most athletic person in the world, and you could play terribly one day, and you got to come out and forget about it, and on to the next day. Keep going. It's a great game.
Yeah.
I have a love-hate relationship with it, as I assume most people do.
What else would you be doing for a living if you weren't an attorney?
I would honestly, I'd probably be developing real estate. So I would. It's such a cool industry. There's so many opportunities, so many different angles, so many different things you can do with it. And so I just see a tremendous. Yeah, I just see a whole separate side of it from a developer side, and I think it would be a cool thing to pursue in
Oh,
another life.
I don't know. You would think you still have some time in this life.
Maybe we'll see. I'm all in right now with the legal side, but we'll see. Maybe, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
developments need legal help as well. So,
certainly. Yep.
uh, who are you reading or listening to right now for news, information, or inspiration?
So right now I'm reading. Well, there's two. So the first one is Peter Linneman. It's his quarterly market analysis. It's called the Linneman Letter. It's a great real
Oh,
estate
I've heard of
tool
this. Yeah.
resource. Yeah, and he started he started the Wharton School there at Wharton, the real estate program there as, at Wharton. And he's an economist and provides market analysis and research, and it's a fantastic tool for a lot of real estate professionals. It's not just real estate and economics. There's some geopolitical elements to it as well. But it's a fairly long publication, but it's, like I said, it's quarterly, and it's been a great resource and tool for me over the past couple of years. So read that regularly. The summer edition just came out this week, so that's why I'm referring to that one. The other one it's a blog. It's JP Conklin, and he also has a podcast called The Rate Guys, and they talk about interest rates, derivatives, swaps, and hedging. It's really a financial interest rate podcast, interest rate blog, discussing the current state of affairs. It's a great resource as well.
That's great. What is one thing you do every day for healthy self-care?
I work out, and I try to work out every day in one way or the other, whether it be lifting or cardio, some element there. It's a good separation of my day. But to start my day, it's usually meditation and prayer.
Very nice. And do you think leaders are born or trained?
It's it's a great question. I know this is this has been studied time over time. I know there's been so many things. I don't, in my opinion, I certainly think people are born with leadership qualities, and have an interest to drive, and to push forward, and then to manage other people. I certainly think that there are people that just have that in them. They're born with that. But I do think that it is also learned. But I think there's an element of the learning in that you have to have that want to learn it. You have to have that drive to want to be there. And I just that's something that's just in. I don't necessarily know if it's in everyone, but some people may be more motivated than others. So yeah, I certainly think it's a little combination of both. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. Well, thank you, Liam. This has been a great interview, and I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.